Good afternoon, Professor Cody. My name is Jordan Pierce, and for my final CMN presentation, I decided to do it on the organization called the UFC. The UFC is formerly known as the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and it is a world-renowned organization that regulates mixed martial arts fighting globally. So let me just start you off with a little brief history. Approximately 6 years ago, Dana White and his partner Lorenzo Fertitta purchased Pride Fighting, which is now known as the UFC, from two brothers who own Dream Stage Entertainment. Pride Fighting was mainly held in Asia, Thailand, many of those different countries, where North American, South American, and many global fighters would come to fight in this competition annually. But now today, the UFC actually holds approximately 12 to 14 events worldwide. So at the beginning of their organization, the UFC, Dana White and his partner Lorenzo were very afraid that this company would not flourish, but after their hard work and perseverance, they made it into the largest regulated MMA organization today. So this organization is based around the sport mixed martial arts. So based on the title, it is different forms of martial art techniques. So the 5 common ones we see in the sport today are boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, as well as Muay Thai. Boxing, as we know, is just a stand-up combating technique where many North Americans have actually adopted this. But jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai are more of Asian fighting styles that have been adopted by North American fighters as well, but originated in these places. And as well, kickboxing is one of the main ones that they use today because it incorporates different striking to the head, the body, as well as to the legs. Okay, so the rules of regulation of mixed martial arts. Firstly, we're going to start with the octagon. The octagon has been innovated from the classic boxing ring that you see in boxing still today, but it has 8 sides, as an octagon does, and it's closed in by a cage, so it's just like a normal fence you would see outside, because many of the fighters today tend to fight on the ground, and you wouldn't want them falling out of the ring and whatnot. The second rule are the fouls. So fouls are anything that's illegal that fighters are not allowed to commit while fighting. So these include no eye gouging, no hair pulling, no biting, striking an opponent in the genital area, hitting in the back of the head, as well as kneeing an opponent when they're on the ground. All of these different fouls can severely hurt and injure the fighters, therefore, of course, they're illegal. The third are the different weight classes. So firstly, we have the lightweight division, which is 155 pounds, anything below and up to 155 pounds. The second is welterweight, which is anything from 160 pounds to 170 pounds, and most fighters do fight at the maximum weight capacity for these weight classes. The third is middleweight, which is anywhere from 175 to 185 pounds. And again, most of these fighters do fight at 185 pounds. Then we have light heavyweight, which is anywhere from 190 to 205 pounds. And like I said, most fighters do fight at the 205 weight class, or anywhere from 200 to 205 to not allow their opponent to have the advantage on them. And then we have heavyweight, which is anything above 205 up until 300 pounds. So most of these fighters in this weight class do fight at approximately 235 pounds and up. That's just a statistic that they found as the sport has progressed. The last one here is a catch weight. A catch weight is not a specific weight class, but it's an in-between weight in which 2 fighters can agree to fight at. So say that 2 fighters, like I said, do agree to fight, but one of them is fighting at middleweight and one of them is fighting at light heavyweight. They would find maybe a weight at 195 pounds that they're both comfortable with, and then they would fight at that weight. The last rules that I want to mention is the time limit on the bouts. So most fights you see on TV are all preliminary fights, and these consist of 3 5-minute rounds. But when you're fighting for a championship belt in any of the different weight classes, they're all 5-minute rounds. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so I just want to give you a little background on the ways to win. So firstly, we have a submission. A submission is when you force your opponent to tap out. So a tap would mean that they're giving up and they're forfeiting the fight. This can be caused by a choke or mainly an arm or a leg lock. The second is a technical knockout or a knockout. A technical knockout is when an opponent is fiercely battling and striking the opponent severely that the ref has to call it a stop. And a knockout is when they're either hit in the leg, in the head, the body, the neck, forcing a fighter to not be capable of fighting any longer. A decision is when we follow the entire match through, so at the end of the 3 5-minute rounds or the 5-5-minute rounds, the judges have a scorecard, and whichever opponent has the most amount of points at the end of the bout, then they prevail. As well, we have a no contest. A no contest is when a fighter is stricken and he is incapable of fighting any longer. This can be caused by a gouge to the eye or maybe a popping of the knee or a buckled knee or whatnot. Okay, so the UFC, formerly known as Pride Fighting like I mentioned, began in the mid-1990s. And many of these fighters did cross over from Pride Fighting to the UFC. So here's a list of some of the classic fighters that we've had in the UFC. So the first one being Royce Gracie, who was a former Pride fighter, Ken Shamrock, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, as well as Matt Hughes. All of these fighters were former champions in Pride and UFC, and basically hold the reputation for the UFC from when it started until today. Many of the current fighters, current being as when the UFC first started, are Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida, BJ Penn, George St. Pierre, Brock Lesnar, Rashad Evans, and Quinton Rampage Jackson. And if you watch TSN or The Score or Sportsnet today, all of these fighters are just as publicized as Sidney Crosby or as publicized as Wayne Gretzky was back in the day, because they're all a vision to this sport, a role model to this sport. So I just felt like these fighters deserve the mentioning. Okay, so the UFC has innovated itself severely, and this is because of the publicity it's had on TV. So firstly, it has many different shows. First one being MMA Connected, second being UFC All Access, UFC Unleashed, as well as different pay-per-view events. MMA Connected deals with current news, injuries, reports, and whatnot. All Access takes us into the life of a fighter, and UFC Unleashed is coverage of an event that was previously held on pay-per-view. And the pay-per-view events are obviously the live belt championship matches that people pay for in order to view this fight. The main publicity that the UFC has had and the popularity that's risen is because of The Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter is a reality show in which different fighters compete to get onto the show, and then while they're on the show, they compete to get a 6-figure contract from the UFC. This shows the development of fighters and takes you to a personal level with them. So basically when they become professional, you already have a background on their life story, so they become your favorite fighter, or you have common interests between them. As well, it gives us a behind-the-scenes look at MMA and how grueling the training process is, what they have to eat, what they need to go through in order to be successful in the fighting world. Okay, so just to wrap everything up, the UFC is the newest and biggest up-and-coming sport in the world today. You can see it, like I said, on Sportsnet, The Score, and everything, and it actually has surpassed boxing in live pay-per-view events. Like I said, they hold about 12 to 14 annually, which is ginormous. They have many sponsors, like many of the professional sports. Tap Out and Affliction are both affiliates of the UFC that they created, as well as Under Armour and Nike are huge sponsors as well. They have innovated the world of fighting. They brought it from an underground sport in Asia to a world-renowned organization that regulates and that trains these fighters properly, and they're basically socially responsible for them like any other business. So Mrs. Cody, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you very much.